All right. Welcome to another episode of Zero Trust Journey. My name is Victor Monga. I am the co-host and producer of this webcast and podcast. With me, I have my co-host Steve Turner and two amazing guests we brought in today to talk about Zero Trust. I know it's a journey, as we always talk about during this these episodes, but these two gentlemen have actually lived that journey through and here to give their insights and perspectives. So, Steve, why don't we start with your introduction, Turner, and we'll pass it on to Abhishek and then Steve Noel.
Yeah, Victor, super excited to be hosting the podcast with you and super excited to speak to our guest today because I love that we can bring on folks that have real world like experience with a lot of this so that we can help folks sort through the buzzword bingo, the fun, the marketing, to actually put pedal to the metal to like actually implement this stuff in their organizations.
That's how the market works, right? All right. So Abhishek and Steve, they both are from DoD sector. They both work there, but today they're going to be talking about their insights, their experiences, what they have understood from Zero Trust, and especially the lens of from identity and access management. I know, Steve, that's your favorite topic. When you were at Forrester Analyst covering Zero Trust at the tip of the Zero Trust hype cycle, this was your favorite topic. So again, we'll be talking about that in this episode. And one thing we always start with, wherever you are in your journey, just take a step back and think about it, where you're going with this one. Don't let vendors influence you where you're going. Have your business drive that. So that's the whole point of these episodes and where we talk about journeys. Abhishek, Steve, welcome to our episodes and shows, and really appreciate you taking the time and speaking with us. Abhishek, I'll start with you. Give us your view into or the memory you can recall the first time you heard Zero Trust and you thought, yet another buzzwords in security. This is gonna pass.
Yeah, so thank you again for having me, Victor and Steve, on the show. Super excited to come talk about Zero Trust and cybersecurity. So I have kind of an ironic answer to this.
Okay.
When I first heard about Zero Trust, I was pretty interested in it. It was back when I was studying for my CISSP. I actually heard about it through Google's Beyond Trust security framework. I think they've been working on that for well over a decade now, and I think that's their implementation of Zero Trust for an enterprise perspective. So when I came across it, I thought it was a very cool kind of like approach to enterprise cybersecurity. Fast forward to now, I feel like there's more noise now, right? That was in about 2017, 2018 is when I think Zero Trust started to catch on. And now I feel like every vendor is out there essentially claiming that they do Zero Trust as if it's like one thing or like out of the box, they just roll it out to an enterprise. So short answer, I feel like the industry is a little bit more noisy now when it comes to Zero Trust. But I feel like it's always been real, right? I think it's now just packaged in a much more digestible manner.
So when you say that it's real, like I'd love to pull that out a little bit more because in organizations that I talk to in my current job and when I was an analyst, reality seemed to escape a lot of folks and would love to hear from your perspective, like what makes it real for you? Because I love that you called out that your first impression of it was excitement, like, and knowing that this is, the best path for a cybersecurity framework to pursue.
Yeah, so I think what really makes this real is, as you guys are familiar with the Zero Trust framework, it doesn't kind of just look at like one kind of lens at an enterprise's cybersecurity, right? It's not just like the network layer, or it's not just the application layer, and it's kind of it's a holistic approach, right? There's the multiple pillars. You have your user pillar, application pillars, data pillars. And so I think when you start working in a large enterprise or small enterprise and you start trying to implement cybersecurity, having a framework that has that holistic picture, I think that's when it starts to feel real, right? Um, and when you work in like super large organizations, sometimes you don't get to touch all the different pieces of it, right? Like you may be super specialized in identity and access management, or you might be just be working, with firewalls and like at the network layer. But when your agency comes out with like a zero trust strategy, or like they want to implement zero trust at the enterprise level, right? You're forced to almost be exposed to that broader picture,
Yeah.
right? So as a cybersecurity professional or cybersecurity manager, right, you're no longer kind of implementing cybersecurity with a narrow lens. Now you have that exposure and visibility into, okay, this is how what I am doing from a capabilities perspective kind of fits into the broader picture.
Yeah. Yeah. But one thing I'll say here that one of my friends, we were talking about zero trust journey and having him on the show as well. And I asked the same question, that what made zero trust the reality in your organization? And funny enough, he said it has teeth, which means when we were implementing it, it brought a little bit of uncomfort into different business units. It brought a little bit of difficult conversation that we wouldn't have it generally.
Yeah.
It brought a question to how we do our dev management, development cycles. It brought into question that how do we do access provisioning? It brought into question how do we segment our network? So it was almost holding people accountable for what they're supposed to do. It was nothing new. He said, like, whatever the outcome was, it was ideal situation what people or the function should be doing it. We should be segmenting it, like PCI DSS dictates clearly that you need to have enclaves. A lot of the compliance frameworks these days, they have it like you need to have transaction verification when the user is logged into your enterprise application. So nothing new, but with this framework now, you're holding people accountable. No, during our CSSP training, and we talked about this a little bit briefly at that time as well. When you heard zero trust the first time, and when you started actually getting into it, what did you feel? How did you feel about it? Like, is this something that enterprises are going to adopt, or is it going to be another vendor plastered marketing things that you'll see it during the conferences?
I remember hearing it, and it sounded like it was supposed to be some sort of initiative, right? When I first heard it years ago, and I can't even tell you how many years ago I heard it when I heard it the first time. And in our space, there's 1,000,001 initiatives, right? You hear about it all day. And I thought, hey, zero trust, I can get on board with that. I was born and raised in security. I implicitly don't trust, any computer, any person or anything. That's just the mindset when you're kind of when you've been in this field for so long. So it wasn't a hard concept. So it didn't captivate me right there, along with all the other initiatives that were, being pushed down. So I was like, well, let's see if this come and goes, like, I don't know, 3D TVs or something. Well, we're here today, and it's still around. And like you said, it has teeth. And, while I can't take credit for sitting through all the conferences, the zero trust topics, and going through all the blogs, and I bring in good friends like Abhishek, who has, they have done that due diligence, just being in this industry and space for a while. I mean, Vic, you were really the one to really invigorate me to go out there and do my homework, and what have I been missing? What do I need to catch up on, and really see the teeth that have come out of this. And it, funny enough, after reaching out, we've taken on a huge project where there are mandates, there are policies now at a high level that have deadlines that say these things will be implemented with a zero trust foundation by some time, and it's been over the last couple of years, and I'm kind of helping organizations catch up to these deadlines that are mandates. And so seeing that go from, a philosophy or a mindset into this is how it applies to an organization has just been really cool to just jump back in there and say, all right, I haven't gone through all the conferences that Abhishek's gone through, but let me catch myself back up. And here's the bridge on where just experience in cybersecurity meets this new, relatively new initiative that's growing into something that has teeth that can kind of latch on has been a really cool experience. But, that's just, my initial perspective on that topic.
What I think is really interesting between the things that both of you have said so far, right, is, and Victor kind of calling out, this having like teeth, is really interesting when you dive into it, because there's the multiple levels of teeth, right? Like there's the technical implementation teeth, where these teams that haven't traditionally talked to each other, or maybe were a checkbox on some project managers like Excel sheet, like on a task that had to get done. Now these teams are forced to talk to each other because their stuff is supposed to integrate with one another. And so I would love to hear from either of you, like your experience with that, in maybe potentially blowing up, the traditional, way of going about, securing, different organizations. What has been your experience with that? Like, what have you seen so far? Like, in your comings and goings, with how these things have been implemented, you know, has that changed the narrative with how teams work together? Like, because I always am interested to hear, from that perspective, like what people have experienced, like as you go and pave the way, towards, implementing a zero trust framework.
Yeah, Steve, I can take the first crack at that one. So I'll say this, as we talked about zero trust having a lot of hype, and I think there are pros and cons associated with it, right? One of the pros is because there's so much publicity and it's a familiar concept, people who are typically not in the cyber arena are familiar with the concepts, right? Or they've heard of it, right? And so what we've seen, or what I've kind of experienced now, is that software engineers and DevSecOps engineers, right, when they're working and developing an application, they know that they need to integrate with some sort of enterprise ICAM system, right? And so early on in their development lifecycle, right, they're engaging with the teams. So I would say these are some of the pros, which I think has shifted over the last several years, right? Whereas it was, although software engineering happened in a very agile fashion, that cybersecurity review didn't really come into mind. Like you mentioned, it's like a checkbox. It doesn't come in until like in the later cycles
Yeah.
Of the software development life cycles. Whereas now, with zero trust becoming so commercialized and so common, engineers and typically non-cybersecurity professionals recognize, okay, hey, eventually I will need to integrate in some sort of an identity access management. So what are the COTS products that I'm using? So it just kind of initiates those conversations that typically happen later on in the development lifecycle are starting to happen earlier. And I think that benefits the all enterprises across the board.
That's exciting to hear. Like, Stephen, please go ahead.
No. I was going to give a different perspective. If you wanted to chime in, feel free.
I love that. Like, please lean into that, because what Abhishek shared, like I've seen that firsthand, but I've seen very different reactions to like folks trying to get on board with this concept.
Sure. Yeah. Last time I talked with Vic, I think I kind of talked about the concept of traditional cybersecurity versus zero trust, and how cyber has grown from this mentality of an organization or a business has some service or technology or system that it needs to keep up. And, at a fundamental level, availability has to be there for what it provides to its stakeholders. And as that evolves, then the concept of security or cybersecurity comes in and says, we want to add on top to kind of protect, and kind of a castle and moat perspective is an analogy I've heard. And then, you fight that battle of saying, okay, well, I want to help you. We need funding. We have to establish value. We don't sell anything, so we don't make money. So our value is, seen differently. You have to incorporate things like risk and what happens if there are compromises, right? And then establish your value, hope you get funding, and you can establish cybersecurity. What I think zero trust does really well is it communicates to all stakeholders. Just the way that it somehow inverses that and says, from the ground up, we will implicitly not trust anything, any tangible thing out there, but it has to be in a way that we can verify, authenticate, and then have a policy that will allow trust and somehow everyone like is really on board when they hear that, right? It's so much, it seems from a cybersecurity practitioner's perspective so much more strict, but there's bounds and it's there to protect. But everyone, seems to be, on board with the zero trust approach. So I'm a proponent of it from that perspective. And I've seen, to your question on seeing teams come together. In that same sense, security comes in. There's business units, and you have to apply, and it feels oppressive to them to say, "Hey, we're going to somehow restrict in a way that protects you, and that's the perception it has, and it's hard to get over that. From a zero trust perspective, it's saying we need to come together because we have to be in sync. We have to protect the organization as a whole, the services as a whole, and it involves everybody into when we all have to be collaborative and be in sync. And I've seen that here in more recent projects where you're taking, I come from big beasts of organizations, right? Huge structures. And so while we may had a sister or brother team here that works fairly well together, right? You can bicker at times, but you both have the same parent kind of thing. So eventually, it gets hashed out. But now it's going up a chain and out, and you have a second cousin twice removed organization that needs to incorporate with you. And you may have never worked with that group before, but it's a way to come together and say, what can we do together to help our organization? And what that the tone there and the communication is a lot different than we're enforcing the policy and now y'all need to go do something and lock down or whatever, and completely different tones. And so I'm very much supportive of the zero trust approaches. In a way for me to bridge gap. Again, I'm not the zero trust expert, you all are, but having the experience in cybersecurity and seeing like, wow, like all my zero trust friends are they're making headway with a lot of stuff. And, here we are, we're creating a policy, people don't like it and everything. And so I think incorporating these principles is key for growth and sustainment and the organizations we support.
You reminded me of something though. So every time before zero trust concept came out, when we security people have to do something or need something from our organization or business units, we tried this putting security next to the function. We said we used to do dev ops, let's do dev sec ops. We used to do operations, let's do security operations. We even did business security or security business, whatever you want to call it. Outcome of that was we should hire BISO, which is business of information security officers. The point I'm trying to make is we were chasing the business to secure. We were chasing the business functions to make it right for the business. Zero trust came out with a framework that people can understand in plain English. People know trust. Within society, we have the terms trust, family, friends, whatever. And the second part of that is we're saying the business, you are at the center. Security is as part of the other functions of the business. We work with you. So instead of I am chasing DevOps, I'm chasing business, I'm chasing whatever, no longer there's a chase. We all are working together forward, but business is in the center. I think that tone, that brought the businesses together. That brought the functions together. To your point, Noel, you just said, it changed the conversation from security being the, oh my God, now they're going to stop me doing something. It brought the conversation to, there's a problem out there. We need to be mindful of it. And we don't need to change what we're doing. We just need to measure how we're doing it. And that itself, I think the zero trust value proposition is that it's bringing accountability to all functions of the business, putting business at the center of the conversation now. Security is the advisors, which we always wanted to be. We always wanted to be advisor to the business instead of chasing them. We tried it, right? With the different terms I just mentioned. But zero trust brought us all together. Steve Turner, I think one thing we talked about last time where these are great stories where business came together. But that's I would say again, this is not a real stat, but let's say that's 50% of it. The other side of the 50% is zero trust. Actually, it's uphill battle in organizations. You just can't implement anything. People are used to having root access. People are used to having admin. People are used to having their SSH keys flying into their repos. Asking them to change that is a habit change. Asking them to change that, it means they have to actually think about a little bit extra before they press that enter key next time. So it brought the processes in question, not the technology. Tana, maybe you have any stories, or if and Abhishek or Anil, if you have any stories you want to share where you have heard or read that it was not as simple as that you brought in this great concept and everybody's cheering and everybody's like coming together. Yeah, that's a good success story. What's the other side of it?
Yeah, I can take a stab at that. And Victor, you're 100% right, right? So zero trust is not just a whole bunch of capabilities, and there's that whole people and process element of it as well. I know, well, and I've heard this so many times, all too frequently in our organization as well. Is just like, okay, well, hey, you can't directly do this. Now you have to go through like a PAM solution. You have to, do MFA, and then they're like, why?
Yeah.
And they come back and say, hey, we can't do this because of XYZ reason. And then you have to come back, and it's always a push and pull, right? Getting people to change their behaviors, especially with some of those system administrators for like legacy applications, or some of those more
They're used to it.
they're used to it. Yeah, they're used to it, and it's really hard for them to kind of change what they're doing. And I think every organization, I think it almost becomes kind of a cultural challenge, right? To make that change. Organizations that have a culture of adaptive change, like you'll see that in a lot of startups that are like, for them to survive, they have to constantly innovate and constantly stay on top of the latest trends. You see them being a lot more successful in adopting cultural changes. But large organizations, it's hard for them to move in the same way. And something like zero trust is not just a technological change, right? It's also a whole cultural shift. And so, yeah, there's many complainers, I guess, is on this journey.
I love everything that you called out around that, because to both the points that Victor was making and the points that you just like ran through, it's like, I have seen the most successful efforts get pushed from the top down. When everybody's operating against the same mission or the same objective, that tends to go over a little bit easier, because you're not, like, you obviously are not responsible for having the political battle with somebody over like why they can't go and log in as administrator directly or have permanent admin like on the boxes that they used to have. Like, I think the most interesting things, and something that I wanted to point out from some of Victor's comments earlier, is I've even seen a lot of private organizations and government organizations where they're either passing, we've seen with the EO, like at the federal level, basically saying, hey, all civil agencies, you got to get in line, and this is where we need to centralize our services, and this is the beat we have to march to. And then, on the private sector side, what's been really interesting, and I don't know if you all have seen this, but in some of the investor reports that they're communicating out to, investors and other people who are buying stock in these companies, is they're saying, as a top level of objective, they're listing out zero trust as one of their objectives to pursue and to get
I know that.
things in a better state. And so I thought that was really interesting, how you can tell whether a company is serious about security or not, or an organization serious about security is, you can go into a lot of the investor documentation or, the policy that is being passed to tell, what direction are things headed in, or read the tea leaves of what, these organizations are going to end up pursuing. And I love, Abhishek, how you're talking about the people and processes, because that's a tough pill to swallow. Like, that is for a lot of folks who have been around a while, like, or even folks that are new to industry who are just used to having things a particular way or used to having a particular level of access to do their job, sometimes they don't understand why things are changing. And so, I'd love to hear from either you or Steven, like, from a change management perspective, right? Like, okay, we're talking people and processes. We're talking about changing things up, and change is scary, right? Like, it's for some people love it. Um, I want to hear like what has been your experience with that? What have you seen succeed and fail on that front? Because change is hard. It's really difficult, and to get it right is even more difficult.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll take the first stab if you don't mind, Abhishek. Yeah, what you said earlier, Steve. You've seen success when it really becomes a top down initiative, and I think when we talk about zero trust and we talk about it's a mindset, it's a philosophy, it's some of these terms. I think those terms are in the same realm of a vision or a mission. What you see when you go to an organization's about me page, what's their vision, what are they trying to do, what's their mission, core about, you can throw what's our philosophy or mindset in there, at least on the internal technical level or IT level. And so to see that from a top down, it again, it has to be communicated well, because what have we heard about vision and missions from certain colleagues? Like it's just a dumb statement that we have on our website, or I don't really understand the vision. I don't know what the point of this, and all that's saying is that leadership is not communicating well of what the vision is, or they haven't refined their vision. And in the same sense, with zero trust, you can just throw the words, we're pro zero trust, a zero trust initiative, whatever. But if there's no heart, there's no meat, and there's no support behind that, there's not good communication, it's going to fall by the wayside, right? It's going to fail, and you're not going to have much of a zero trust program. And I was going to get into the whole maturity model thing, but Vic, the last thing I think I remember you asking me is where do people start? And I was listening to something, and I came across probably a colleague from the Cloud Security Alliance, Jason Garbus.
Okay, great.
I stole a little line from him. He said, "Don't try to secure everything at once." And we had that conversation, Vic, before I came across one of the videos that he was on, and and it's about knowing your landscape and starting small and to bring it all together of a maturity model, right? We know you can't go from 0 to 100. And maturity models, even outside, I believe Zero Trust kind of makes their own maturity model, but we've seen maturity models for cybersecurity and for businesses, and going from, baby steps of being reactive to things to progressive and having advanced procedures, policies and procedures, processes and procedures, pardon me. And so, with that, I think, from the top down, being able to communicate it well, being able to say, hey, I don't want to be intimidating with this, and we're a baby just crawling right now. We want to run at Olympic speeds, but let's just take bite size of what we can do. And we talked about that, Vic. Where do I even start? Do you have a risk management program? Do you know your assets? Where are your risks and vulnerabilities? If there are some critical areas that need refinement, it's a perfect opportunity. If you're going to tear it down and rebuild it, why not do that and incorporate some zero trust in it? And that's it's a perspective I have, and obviously I feel.
Yeah, I want to underscore what you said, right, about communication, right? And I think one thing that really, really is important is repetition, right? Repetition. Communicate the vision, communicate the objective, right? I think no matter how much an organization thinks that they're communicating the importance, right, they're not doing it enough, right? Especially, else, it's all about repetition. And in my experience, right, people want to buy into a vision, right? But if they hear it once at a quarterly meeting, enough, or at a monthly sync, that's not enough, right? It needs to be ingrained as frequently as possible. until it becomes second nature, right? And one of the things that I employ with my team is whenever we're having a planning meeting, right, is to reorient every planning meeting with where we're going, right? And I think organizations that want to adopt and drive towards that cultural change, right, especially from a cybersecurity perspective, right, is to repeat that message as much as they can at every engagement that they have with their team, with their enterprise, with their workforce, right? Underscore the value and the direction that we're going, and I think that goes a long way. Once people can kind of essentially just absorb that message and it becomes ingrained into their daily practices, then you'll start seeing some of that strategic change that or kind of strive for.
100%. And again, all good points. 100% agree. I will give two examples. One bad example where people start and failed. One good example. Bad example is someone heard Zero Trust at a conference. Great idea. Came back, put a project from IT security perspective that we're gonna do this for the company. We're gonna push the business to adopt Zero Trust. They have the whole architecture done where we're going to have identity tested here. We're going to do MFA. We're going to do all of these things, network segmentation, and SIEM needs to log everything from here onwards. And business processes what they need to do. Great. 6 months passed, 12 months passed, 24 months passed, 36 months passed, and nothing happened. Why? We didn't buy in. People didn't buy into the plan to begin with.
We've been saying communication.
Exactly. So tying it back there. So the other example is where it worked all great. A security person heard about Zero Trust at a conference, comes back, and they will start talking to the business leaders, the team leaders. Hey, how do we do this? What do we do this? Start asking the right questions. Don't talk about Zero Trust. Don't talk about security yet. Talk about what they do, how they do it. What would it take if we do it differently? Manpower, money, technology, what would it take? Find out the gaps before you put the project to push the business. Continue to get a buy-in from business leaders, team leaders as well, because that's important. If they're not behind to change the processes, you're going to have more exception logs into your risk register than the actual policy lines. That's not effective at all to begin with. We want everybody to think exactly in the same neural link where this is where we need to push the business, but it cannot be a push from security or IT. It should be a consensus with business leaders, IT leaders, security leaders, team leaders, and at the end, at the top executive leaders. They should think this will help the business. It should not be a security initiative. It should be a business initiative, but at the end, Zero Trust framework helps you kind of get to that tactical level, what needs to be done. But we don't need to mention Zero Trust if we are in a meeting talking to someone that, hey, how do you process this claim? Well, I take a phone call, I punch this button and I tell this person, great. Now you look at it. Did they verify what they log in? Did they put an entry? You start realizing that steps that they do and where Zero Trust needs to be implemented. You inventory that and then ask someone that, what would it take if you don't do this way and the other? What would it take if you do it differently? Because now you're asking their opinion instead of you're telling them, okay, from tomorrow onwards, you're going to log into this, you're going to check out the password, then you're going to punch this, click this, and then here's the 30 other steps. They're like, that's it. Sorry. Peace out. Don't drive the business away. So again, good, bad examples on that one where we have seen Zero Trust being very good success, where companies are actually buying into it, and the others are, it was just a security initiative, good physics project on paper, but that's about it.
Yeah, definitely. Vic, I was laughing, or I was at least chuckling under my breath here because going through a leadership track here with my company, and you have to do it in the academic order that they set, and so you're sitting in certain or you're watching certain videos that you have to watch before you meet with your cohort, and it's all about interacting with your employees, with other leaders, hiring, things like that. For the most part, you're like, okay, just going through the motions. And I came across this one part where it was talking about communication, and it was talking about listening and being empathetic. And the scenarios are scenarios we see in life, right? In our relationships with friends, with our significant others, children. That you should listen. You shouldn't just hear, in one ear and out the other, but actually process and listen to what's going on. And with that, if you can empathetically see from their perspective, what they're seeing, it's only going to help the communication. It's going to help the relationship there. And so it's something that with engineering backgrounds, engineering mindsets, like myself, I'll come in and my instinct is I already know what they're going. First few words out of their mouth were, X, Y, and Z. I know they have this problem. They probably need to do this. That this is, admittedly more of something that I think. And so if you can communicate and in a way that's actively listening, figuring out what their fears are, where their pain points are, I think it only helps to be able to give that back and say, hey, with zero trust, without even bringing it up, just listening and gathering your data and then coming back at it in a way that can be received a lot better. It's hard for me to do, and so it's something that I actively work on, but it does help a lot. And from this examples you gave.
Yeah, and I think just to kind of put a ribbon on it, right? People are much more likely to buy into a solution, or when they feel like they're part of this solution, right?
That's right.
They help contribute. They're much more likely to buy into it rather than being told what to do.
Yeah, that's
I
100%. Yeah.
I think like the most interesting piece out of all that, and Victor, I love that you called out those examples, because I'm just like, oh boy, I've seen that way too much, like on both sides. But I think my favorite part about all of this is like the shift for all of this is like from the traditional security mindsets where we're just going to shove all of this technology and all this policy down your throat. You're going to have to deal with it because that's just the edict. That's how things operate.
Yeah.
Zero trust, if they try to take the same mindset around that to Victor's point, I've just seen it fail every single time, whether it be 6 months later, 12 months later, years later, in some cases that I've seen, where they have to take a whole reset. And maybe in some cases they've spent, a significant amount of budget that they should have never spent on the project. And now they have to eat crow, like when they're coming back and saying this failed, and it's like, well, it failed because it wasn't in collaboration with others. That, like, Stephen, I love that you called out almost the empathetic listening, like, collaborating with peers. And Abhishek, I loved everything you called out around that as well, like, because truly, if you take away the word zero trust, right, and you just call it kind of the new way of doing security, that's in collaboration. And Victor, I love the call outs earlier about how we tried to put people who knew security knowledge within different business units. I've experienced that, or we created new security roles that sat within all of these different things. We found like that didn't work because, again, it wasn't, the culture wasn't ingrained in individuals as part of their objective, mission, maybe their job role, that security should be foremost, like front and center. And what I think is really interesting, going all the way back to Abhishek about what you were mentioning of how your first exposure to zero trust was, with Google's Beyond Corp. If you look at all the hyperscalers now, between Google, Amazon, Microsoft, like, I think over time they have been pulling that narrative like more and more towards front and center, saying that security is one of their core goals or one of their core missions. I think it's taken some others longer than the other ones, unfortunately, to kind of see, that path. And that's where I think, where I caution some practitioners, because the fine line between a mission for those hyperscalers being security and selling security, is really, really like, that's such a gray area. Like,
Yeah.
Especially, I love Google's story because Beyond Corp for a very long time, they didn't productize it on purpose because they wanted it to bleed into the collective consciousness of the security community. And so I loved, Abhishek, when you were talking about how your exposure kind of came to Zero Trust, that you got it through that framework, because it's one of my favorite things like out there. And um but that, it's also another perfect example of like when they tried to productize it, after kind of getting into the collective consciousness, kind of fell flat on its face, because some of those things don't translate that way. And some,
Yeah.
in organizations or practitioners are, just like the two of you have been talking about, they're smarter than a lot of people give them credit for. To, funny enough, so weird, right? Like, we've been practicing cybersecurity for a while.
When my funniest is when the vendor comes in and tell you like, yeah, you don't know how you're doing it, but if you use my product, I'll tell you like, dude, you've been here what 10 seconds? I've been here 10 years. Yeah, it's like, how are you gonna tell me exactly? So it's funny, like, yeah, you're required, you should, you must. Like, yeah, all of that is good, but you don't know what I'm living through, man, every day.
Yeah, I just have two kind of anecdotes to what you said, Steve. So Google's Beyond Corp, right? That whole framework came as a response to a business challenge that they had. I believe they had a compromise in 2009, and so there was there's a business value proposition there for them to do security better, right? And I think that's another reason why Zero Trust has gotten so commercialized, right? Is as you've seen these compromises get bigger and bigger and people kind of get more serious about their privacy, right? There's now a real business value or business proposition to do security better, right? When you don't want to be a company that's in the news for leaking your customers' data, right? That has an effect on the bottom line. And I think that's really driven for cybersecurity to go from a kind of a back office function or like an IT somewhere sitting between the CIO's office to having a seat at the big boys table. And that's why most organizations now have a C-suite executive that's responsible for information security, right? You have a CISO at most organizations. And so that's kind of you can kind of see if an organization takes cybersecurity seriously to see if they have that, C-suite executive that's responsible for cybersecurity. And so and then kind of another example you mentioned when Google tried to productize Beyond Core, it didn't work. Another example would be, I would say, kind of like Amazon with S3 when
Oh my gosh.
S3 and essentially the entire cloud market really came out of Amazon's need to, solve a business problem that they had internally. They figured out a way to solve that problem really effectively internally. And they were like, you know what, let's prototype this.
Yeah, let's make money off of it.
Let's make money out of it. And then that gave birth to the entire cloud industry that has now become, a multi-billion dollar industry.
That's why. That's why. I know we gotta wrap up here, but I do want to lean in and double click on that one because it's very important. And that's the whole reason we started this webcast where we talk about the different stages of the journey when it comes to Zero Trust. Listening to vendor pitch how they sold Zero Trust. It's something that I always talk about during these shows where you gotta ask yourself as a practitioner 3 questions. Is this the product I actually need and how did I identify it? They should not be telling you that if you put this, you will achieve Zero Trust. You should have a need out of that strategy that this is what I need. So that's first. Do I need this? It's a great blinky, shiny lights, but that's great. Do I need it in my enterprise? Second, if I implement this, do I have bandwidth to actually effectively use it? If I put this one, how does it actually mature my Zero Trust journey? Which means you need to do the maturity assessment already that if I put this vendor, product, service, platform, whatever that is, how does it actually improve it? By what X it improves it? If the value of the product is higher than what you're gaining, maybe not worth it. Third, and that's the most important, when you're looking at the vendor, what it does, ask yourself how you're going to measure the effectiveness ongoing. Whatever you do, I talk about this continuous validation all the time, but it does bleed into the zero trust where, sure, I will install this and create these policies and have all of this. How do I continuously measure the effectiveness of this? Because zero trust is not something you do it this year and then next year you're just good to go. No, this is going to be ongoing. If it is ongoing, then you're going to continue asking yourself that whatever I'm installing and implementing as a technology control, how do I measure the effectiveness of it continuously? So those are three things I always advise people, and sometimes it changes every now and then, but that's kind of the gist of it, where ask yourself, don't let vendors drive your zero trust strategy. It should be the other way around. That this is my zero trust strategy, and here are the three things I need. 3 precise things I need. You can have 27 other things and total of 30. No, here are the 3 things I need. Show me, prove me, and during your POV cycles or demo cycles, ask for those 3 things. Don't let vendors distract you. So again, irony doesn't beat me that I also work for vendors every now and then. So this is where this whole webcast is about informational and educational, where have the zero trust strategy and take credit of what you have already done. Instead of starting from scratch, whatever you have done, I'm sure you have done something. You have some IT controls. You must have certain security controls. If you're there thinking about zero trust, that means there is something. Take an inventory of that as well. Take credit of that work as well, and then decide what else needs to be done. And don't take it all at once. Just as Abhishek said, start baby steps and then go from there. All right, gentlemen, as we wrap, give us your key takeaways from this and your experiences and your insights for zero trust for our listeners, and we'll wrap with that. Abhishek, you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and I think my biggest takeaway from zero trust, right, is, and we've talked about it ad nauseum here today. It's not just about cybersecurity, right? Zero trust is much more than that. It's a cultural change for an organization. And I think any enterprise that's looking to adopt, if they just look at it from a technology lens, they're going to fail, right? If they just look at it from one perspective, they're not going to be effective in achieving their zero trust objectives, right? Looking at the whole picture, and we talked about this a little bit, like, having that top-down leadership communication, but then also having that grassroots of various organizations collaborating and connecting with each other, reducing silos. So having that bottoms up and that top-down approach across technology, across people, across processes is the most effective way for an organization to deliver on its zero trust objectives.
100%. Totally. Steve Noel?
Geez, do I have anything to say after all? Yeah, Abhishek just put it all in a box and shipped it out. No, I would, I mean, everything Abhishek said. Know your stakeholders, communicate, listen, know who needs to get involved to make the change that you want to make. If you want to be a change agent and zero trust is a part of your initiative, it's going to be super hard to do it alone. It's going to be much easier if you get people behind you, if you get support, top down, bottom up, know your stakeholders, listen, know your audience, and communicate well, and then you'll be in good footing to push something like this.
100%. Turner? I feel like a principal, like I'm calling on people here.
Yeah, I love everything that you guys brought to the podcast today. Like, thank you so much for coming on. I would just drive, the other point of making change for the sake of making change isn't the right way to go about things. I love that any organizations that can align it to whatever their business objectives are, business goals, business outcomes, you're just going to have a much easier time selling zero trust internally and getting things, going. But I can't add anything else beyond what these two have brought here today. Like, again, really appreciate you guys coming on the podcast.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, always a pleasure.
Very much.
All right, gentlemen, this is where we wrap. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for listening to us. Stay tuned for our next episode. And if you have a journey to share with us, please contact us. Contact at thectjourney.com, and see you at next time.